He runs that publishing house over here. So I told him, look here, you heard of Raj Kapoor? He said, what does that have to do with this? So I said, no, I have a story to tell. Raj Kapoor produced a film called Mera Naam Joker. And he thought he's produced the best film of the world and everybody is going to watch it with great degree of excitement and enthusiasm. But it didn't run at all. So out of vengeance then, he came out with Bobby. So I told him, I said, no, I have brought a Bobby for you. So with that kind of persuasion, he agreed to publish a book which was nothing but small tidbit based on diabetes care in layman's language. It was priced very low to begin with, about 100 rupees, then of course they increased. And it got a place in the bestseller section in the World Book Fair at Pragati Maidan. And the highest sale was from a stall. No, nothing to clap. I'm just telling because many of us like him and we have to go through this. And this is a part of the research. I'm telling you a research story actually. So the maximum sale happened from a bookstall, which I had never heard of before, was Rajat bookstall outside PGI Chandigarh. And because all of us have been into this, I wanted to know how this sold maximum from here. And the booksellers then told me कि साहब ऐसा है कि नौजवान लोग आते हैं यहाँ पर हाल वाल पूछने, तो एक तो फल ले जाते हैं खरीद के. So you see, outside every hospital, you have a lot of fruit vendors. So in India, there's a popular belief that you have to take fruit when you are sick. So you have to fall sick to have the privilege of consuming fruit, not normally. So any hospital, anywhere in the country, north, south, even northeast, which is now part of my responsibility, you see, the fruit vendors are most commonly found outside the hospitals. तो एक तो फ्रूट ले जाते हैं, कोई थोड़े मॉडर्न तबीयत के आए तो जूस ले लेते हैं. किताब आपकी सस्ती है तो किसी का ससुर वसुर हो कहते हैं पापा जी को ये किताब दे देंगे, बेड पे लेटे. So you may not care for your own papa, but you are very careful to care about your wife's papa, and therefore that book sold by default. So what I'm trying to say is that even to write and then to be read is equally important. Because if you write the best of the things, it's not read. So you have to make yourself readable. And sometimes you have to take a route, that Bobby route, to become accepted as a writer, so that later on what you write is taken up. It's something like what Satyajit Ray once said in the early 70s when India was going through that era of experimental movies and all that kind of stuff. So Satyajit Ray said, what is the fun of producing a movie which nobody goes and watches? It may be the greatest of the thoughts, the greatest of experiments, the greatest of creativity. If the hall is empty, if it doesn't reach the target audience whom it's meant for. So and he set an example of producing, creations like Pathar Panchali, Charulata, which were off the track and had all the takers. So the freelancers like us have to go through all these things because we are not entitled to the privilege of going through a training school. So that much about Mr. Dogra and his book. And I think equally, the other day I was inaugurating the book fair and I made this point. Of course, we don't have much of publishers over here, but I think the responsibility also lies for the publishers. We need to educate the publishers. Now, I tried that Bobby lesson for my publisher and got him round. But the publisher also has to understand that the publisher's job is not limited to publishing a known author, a saleable author, but discovering new authors. That actually is the responsibility. I came across a letter which Jawaharlal Nehru has written because a part of his regular writing to daughter Indira Gandhi in the early 1930s, where he mentions Rupa Publications, which had just opened up its business in Calcutta. And he mentions that I have come across a book published by Rupa, who has also now opened a small outlet in Allahabad. That's how I came to know of it. And they are producing low-priced books and also giving opportunity to new authors. So I think since all of us are part of the same society, and this, otherwise, many of us, and including like Mr. Dogra, would remain undiscovered. I know how many of us over here know that R.K. Narayan, because I have read R.K. Narayan from A to Z, beginning from his Bachelor of Arts and Financial Expert, Guide, My Story, everything, all the books, not some of them more than once. His first publisher was Graham Greene, because he was determined that I have to get a publisher who's of a certain credibility, and he would keep writing to Graham Greene, who was a known figure, and finally he gave him a break. And R.K. Narayan repaid that. If you read his novel called My Days, which is an autobiographical book, he says that when I was living in Mysore, every day I would have a guest whom I didn't know, would wear a scarf and come, and he was known as Devanand. And he would ask me to sell guide. So I never thought of a novel of mine being converted into a movie. So I didn't pay much heed. And then one day when he came as usual and I avoided meeting him, he left a blank check and told my assistant that just tell Mr. Narayan that if he is determined not to sell it, let him not sell it. But if at all ever he decides to sell the copyrights, it is only me and me who has to sell. You heard that old song, "Tum mujhe na chaho to koi baat nahi, kisi aur ko chahogi to mushkil hogi." So exactly. So in the same vein, the message was left for Mr. Narayan that if ever you think of selling it, this is a blank check. And Narayan says, I thought I must give break to this gentleman, though he was not fully satisfied. Anyway, sorry for having indulged into some sort of an authorly talk in the presence of Mr. Dogra. I am sure the table book that he has produced will not remain confined to a table. It will become an important reference book for the future researchers. And now I'll take a minute about the IIT alumni and the kind of ministerial talk that I'll conclude with, because that is what I have been called here for. Because otherwise I would have been sitting along the other side. So I have to justify my being a chief guest also. So I have been in close contact with the IITians, IIT alumni as a part of my profession, and also, as was being mentioned, my frequent visits to most of the IITs. In fact, my first prize in debating, the second prize, was given to me by IIT Madras, which happens to be in Guindy. So that was an all India debating competition long back. So that made me realize that I could speak well. So anyway, so I think now, to my mind, the challenge also before the IITian is how best to preserve the esteem of being an IITian. I don't know how well I'm trying to put it across, notwithstanding everything that has been said. That esteem sometimes, like any other alumni, sometimes seems to be waning out. I don't wish to elaborate on that because all of us can go back home and think about it. I'll just give you an anecdote, and I think that will serve as a cue. The present Vice Chancellor of Cambridge University is somehow quite fond of me because he's a medical professional. He's a very senior British professor of microbiology. He was a medical microbiologist. So whenever he is in Delhi, I get to learn something. Last time he said something to me which is still lurking in my mind. He actually delivered a compliment. He said, "Your Indian students are damn good and very studious." And you know why? Because my Cambridge will be empty if we didn't have PhDs from India. All your IITians, all others, they come over to Cambridge for PhD. You hardly have these British boys and girls coming out for it. So when he left, this was just about 6 months back, I told one of my colleagues, who also has a scholarly bent, I said, you know what he said? I said he was not complimenting, he was rather abusing you. He said, "Why do you say that?" I said, because in Britain, a boy or a girl will go in for a PhD only after he or she has resolved, determined, decided to devote the rest of their life to that stream of work. Where it ends up is a different matter. He or she could end up as a Nobel Prize winner, or he could leave that experiment halfway, and rarely, who happen to be there, go to our Vice Chancellor. But the Vice Chancellor is not able to make out that. Whereas over here, our boys and girls sometimes think it's a good trophy. A PhD from a Cambridge is a huge trophy. And you could have done a PhD in microbiology, and you could come back and become a CEO in some software, something else. And your proprietor will take pride in saying, "ये देखा मेरा MD Cambridge का PhD है." किस में की PhD और क्या की और क्यों की और कहाँ करके जाना है इसको, that is nobody's concern. So here we go in for such credentials more out of their cosmetic value rather than actually our commitment or aptitude. I don't accuse anybody for that because we are all part of the same. I think that's because we are still evolving, even as a democracy, because in the history of a nation, 66 years of independence or democracy is a very small age. To a man mortal, it appears to be a long age, because when you are 50, 60, then you think subconsciously, oh, my lifetime coming to an end, I could have done that, I could have done that. And then you start bragging, देखो कुछ नहीं हुआ, हमारे वक्त में ये होता था. But it's not so. The life of a nation goes on in centuries. So we are still evolving. We are still to evolve to that level where we would be very clear about our priorities, prioritization, our aptitudes. And therefore, that is one, I think all of us who are devoted to academics would have to think about. I have made a small effort in that direction because that department of personnel also happens to be with me. The moment I took over, there was a strike going on as far as the civil services exams are concerned. And the common grouse was that you don't have a level playing field in the syllabus, etc., etc. So, the common observation from even some of the very senior academicians was that mostly it is the engineers and the doctors and the IITians and the AIMSians who make it to IAS. So initially I had a certain bias, being, predisposed in favor of the technically educated lot as I myself been. So I thought this is simply a kind of misconception for the very reason that most of these boys and girls who make it to civil services would have been toppers or the best right from their high school times. So they must have topped even in high school, even class 12, later on, so on and so forth. But when this agitation went on, and every day I had to go there to feed them the choicest fruit juice, because every third day they would say, "Ab chale ji bhook hartal par." Do ladke serious ho gaye. So there would be a message from me, from the Prime Minister's office, go and just tackle them, handle them. So finally I thought I have to educate myself about all this, because everybody is giving a very subjective opinion about it. So for the first time, which has never happened in the government of India beginning last year, I started the practicing of inviting the first 20 toppers from the civil services IAS and trying to interact with them over a cup of tea, trying to understand and learn from them. I did that last year, I did that this year. And then I took out the question papers of the last 3 years. I read the question papers, I also dug out the books to find out their answers. And even though the questions were evenly placed, for example, if you had two exact questions with a mathematics stream or mathematic oriented, the other two from humanities, the number of questions apparently was equal. But the catch was that if you did, or if a good candidate and an aspirant did that question well or excellently, he was likely to get 99 out of 100, but the other one with the humanities would not get more than 80, the best of best people. And therein came the difference. And the result of that was, the last year we had a topper girl from Maulana Azad making it to IAS. This year, out of the first 20, we have about 4 IITians. We have 2 of the toppers from MBBS. So the other day I was telling them, incidentally, out of the first 5, 4 are girls from Delhi. That you must have read about them. Ira Singhal, Vandana, and the third one is Nidhi. All 3 are from Delhi. 4th is Renu from Kerala. So I was telling them, look here, and they were there with their parents. I said, you can take it as a compliment or otherwise, but you are habitual crackers. So the parents looked back. I said, yeah, because I can say this with authenticity and guarantee. You can be made to sit in any exam and you will qualify. You qualified the IIT entrance or whatever you call JEE. You made it to the merit of IIT. You made it to the merit of MBBS. You qualified that combined entrance test for MBBS. You did this. Any more test also you will do that. So you have the option of finding the safest course and you will go there. But in the process, the casualty is the aptitude and your natural preponderance for a particular stream. So I told that girl, I said, bete, uska kya hua? जो आप MBBS की सीट छोड़ आए, तो ये तो 2 लोगों का नुकसान हो गया। एक जो वहाँ पर जिसकी सीट आपने ली थी, और ये कि यहाँ जिसने आना था with an aptitude for governance suppressed. So his parents were a little embarrassed to hear that, though I didn't mean that. And that is why in the British time, the most important cutoff in academics was metric. पंजाब में आम होता था, मैट्रिक पास कर ली, मुंडे ने मैट्रिक की ते विआह करना, मैट्रिक की नौकरी देनी, एवरीथिंग रिलेटेड टू मैट्रिक। कहते पढ़ लिख लेंदा तो मैट्रिक है, बिकॉज thereafter you would decide where to go. And that happens even in Britain today. That is why the Vice Chancellor of Cambridge tells me, we don't have any British boys coming for a PhD. Kudos, Indians, very nice. All boys, girls want to do PhD from Cambridge. Who would not? You do a PhD from Cambridge and you get a job anywhere. So we have also decided we have appointed a committee after a prolonged deliberation with UPSC to revisit this pattern. And I wish the HRD also takes a call. So we need to have an overhauling of the entire system of how we go about. Some of us who are not meant to write books are expected to write books. And some of us who can write books like Dogra and me are not given opportunity to write. So everything is topsy-turvy. And it's all because we are still in a state of evolution. And second part of it, as I said, the challenge, of course, to add to what, of course, Mr. Pawar was talking of, the job creators rather than job takers. In other words, I would say it's the employability which should be the priority for the nation rather than employment, and even from the government to create. And that's why the present government has now created a separate ministry for skill development. So we create opportunities for employability rather than just leave them employed or underemployed. And for that matter, even an institution like IIT or the other institutions which are also there in the medical field, because of the best that we have, there is an ample opportunity for diversification, as I was hinting a few seconds ago. But where to diversify, how much to diversify, and in which direction to diversify, that is something to be guided by. And who has to take that call is something to be taken. Otherwise, we would have an IITian becoming an MD of a pharma company after doing electronics. So when he cracked his IIT exam and got what is that called, electronic and communication, supposed to be the most sought after, all parents rejoiced. सारे मोहल्ले वालों में मिठाई बांट दी, इसी क्रैक कर दिया जी। और 10 साल के बाद वो MD है फार्मा कंपनी का, सन फार्मा का। So this is, I think, diversification, of course, is a healthy phenomena, and it has to come from the cream, like the one that is seated on the seats behind. But who has to guide that and determine that? That is something, because we are still to institutionalize process, as has happened in, for example, the Cambridge that I was referring to. And therefore, just to conclude, and as I said, to conclude the ministerial talk, I think this is one of the best of the times that is happening in India under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And I'm not saying so because I happen to be the